Hello and welcome to C2 Part 2, Working in the IR Manager. The IR Database Manager allows programmers to oversee, edit, and add IR code sets into the database. In this course, you will learn to create new devices by learning the IR codes into the database, or using Pronto hex codes and importing the Pronto hex codes into the database. You will learn to test codes through the KDMC2500 and how to create your own IR database to store your most commonly used IR devices. The IR Manager software is one of 5 components of the Compass Control software suite, and we have the icon that is the Compass Navigator logo with an IR remote depicted on that icon. We go ahead, open it up, provide proper access and approve proper access, and this is probably a Windows 7 pop-up there that will occur but may not occur if you're using other operating systems. We're now within the IR Manager workspace, and we could take a look in the Device Properties window where you are able to apply to any device, whether it be a switcher or not, and assign a certain number of inputs and outputs. This is very useful for your multi-zone systems such as a audio or video matrix switcher, audio multi-zone amplifier, distributed audio system, etc. But most typically, those sorts of devices are typically controlled via RS-232, and so we'll dive into that a little bit more in C2 Part 3, where we work in the RS-232 Manager. In the Control Properties portion of the Device Properties window, we are able to select if we'd like to use the default level or unselect the default level usage, and this would apply to the voltage of the IR signal that we are sending here. Now, that voltage as a default level will be whatever is configured in your KD MC2500. As you saw, we went through the MC2500 device manager software in C2 Part 1, and you're able to adjust your voltage settings from a default level of plus 12 volts all the way down to 5 volt signal, and that certainly covers the entire spectrum of what is the common voltage range is there. Now, it should be noted that this is currently not active in the IR Manager. This is something that will be enabled in the future, where you are able to set a custom voltage level through the IR Manager software. However, again, this is currently only going to be outputting the IR signals at whatever voltage level you have configured your KD MC2500's respective ports to. Now, we have a block here that is enables you to configure your repeat settings. This can also be done in the Compass Navigator, where you have the option of repeat while holding. You can select how many times you would like to always repeat the signal. You can configure delays between repeats as well. These are typically used for any command that needs repeating. For example, volume plus, volume minus would be certainly an example of any command that would be typically held, holding that volume plus, volume minus to create a ramping feature, if you will. Also, for anything that may just need to be repeated a second time, such as powering up, powering down a projector, and applying these repeat settings is a way to essentially create a macro to control, to power down that projector, for example, once again, where it typically requires you to issue that command twice, the power off command, in order to power down. Now, here you are able to set up your communication with your master controller, your MC. Your IP address here should, of course, match your IP address of your KD MC2500. Now, we went over to these settings in C2 Part 1, working in the MC2500 Device Manager software. But just remember that this third space here should match the third space of your router's IP address, and then the final space is a unique identifier for the KD-MC2500. Above the IP settings, there is a drop-down window that is currently blank because this will be implemented in the future, where we will be able to automatically detect any and all master controllers in the network. Currently, however, again, that is not available, so you must match the IP setting here to communicate through your MC2500 and do any respective testing. We can choose which port to test through, for example, which of these multifunction ports or the main port, IR0, would I like my code set to be tested through? Would I like my physically IR emitter, for example, to be connected to? You have the option of the IR main, which is IR0 again, all the way through IR8, which would be 1 through 8, the 8 multifunction ports of the KD-MC2500. And you also have the option of testing the command out of all possible IR ports simultaneously by selecting all IR. Your IP port setting is that of the MC2500, which is defaulted to 23. Now, an important note, many IP controllable devices may default to port 23, so you may want to adjust that if you have other devices that you'd like to have a unique IP port for. Your learning port can be done through the IR sensor, which is built in on the KD-MC2500. If you recall in C2 Part 1, there is an IR learning window in the front of the chassis for the KD-MC2500. Additionally, you have the 8 multifunction ports that are possible and the main IR port, which brings you to a total of 9 possible IR ports in addition to the IR sensor on the front. You can apply settings for a single code or entire code set of single burst. Now, this is often not used, as typically IR commands feature what is called a carrier, a tail end, if you will, of the IR signal. And if that delay is perhaps too long, a single burst, applying a single burst setting to any command, could potentially cut off that tail end carrier. So in most cases, this will be unselected, and starting in the IR Manager software of the Compass Control 1.05, this single burst being unselected is the default. Down below here, you can choose if you'd like to open a Pronto hex file to import. You can choose to learn and edit commands. You could add new functions, delete functions, and duplicate functions or codes. So let's go ahead and open up a possible, or one of the available IR libraries provided in the Compass Control software. Along with all the other pieces of software that we provide you, the default location for that is in the C drive. In the Program Files folder, or Program Files x86 if you're running a 64-bit system, go to K for Key Digital, open up the Compass Control folder, and we have our library here. In our library, we have RS-232, IR, TCP/IP. Of course, we'll open IR here. And you can see we have pretty large amount of manufacturers' code sets available to you in our library. Let's open up ADA, for example, Audio Design, where we could take a look at some of their devices and the code sets for each. Now here we have something that is very important, Action ID. To any Action ID, these Action IDs are very important that they are properly labeled so that your ID can be, your commands can be utilized through the IntelliBuilder software without having to manually set that up for each button. We could go in here and we see that some are labeled as custom, and perhaps you think there's a better fit in here. We have a power off, What other action IDs are there? Let's scroll through the list. And it looks like, for example, that power off may be the best match. Now you see that it has changed color because it is blue now, the code, because it has a code set, but it has not yet been saved. I can actually go through here and now open a window to view what this code set looks like here. We could see all of the information of the code. We could view it in different time frames. So we see that this actually looks like as though it was a series of IR commands that had been learned rather than just a single IR command. You could see the frequency. We could test this function. And we'll go back into this properties window, this function properties learn edit window, when we go on to learn a command. So we see here, this is how you open the existing libraries for IR. Now, to open and examine is one thing, but if you do wish to create new codes for certain devices, we would have you do that by creating your own custom library. Let's show you how to do that now. We're going to create our own custom library, so we'll go into New. We won't apply any of the settings that I've done here. Now when you create your own custom library, you're going to want to do it in a folder most likely that is separate from the rest there, just in case by uninstalling and reinstalling any software, we don't want you to lose any of your work. So I've created in my documents my own IR library folder here. And we're going to call this one JF key with an underscore key digital. And it's automatically going to add the underscore ir.lib, as in this is a Compass Control IR library file. So I've now created my key digital library. So this, as you can see, is not just a single device, it's actually a folder, if you will, for all key digital parts. So we enter the brand name, key digital, device type. We're going to make a file for the KD 4x4XC. Very simple 4x4 HDMI matrix we have. So it's very important to apply the correct device type here so that all of the classification and categorization applies, again enabling the IntelliBuilder feature of Compass Control to work much more easily. What do we have here? We do have AV switcher as an option. We have HDMI switcher. And we also just have your generic switcher name. So I think out of all of these, and also video switcher as an option, I think out of all of these, I think that HDMI switcher is perhaps the most applicable device type. So we go ahead and name it KD 4x4XC, and now we have created the device types subtree of the Key Digital brand and the model underneath that subtree, that branch, if you will. So here we have KD 4x4XC. Of course, we do not yet have any codes. It's very simple. What we can do here is identify this as a switcher, a matrix that actually has 4 outs and 4 inputs. Now we've created 4 tabs. You have the common all tab, output 1, output 2, output 3, and output 4 tabs. Now the common all is going to be the location for your commands that will apply to the unit as a whole, or perhaps if you have any commands where you'd like to switch all zones simultaneously or mute all zones simultaneously. Again, the KD 4x4XC is a rather simple part that really just has switching and power commands available, simple switching and power commands available via IR. And some of those more advanced all switching commands are available via RS-232. So in the common and all, that would be certainly a good place for the location of the power toggle command. So we just select the tab and enter add function here. Let's go ahead and choose the appropriate action ID, and you see that there is a number assigned to each action ID. Now we can name it anything that we would like to name it. KD 4x4XC via IR features a power toggle, not a discrete power on, power off. And now we are able to learn this code set. So let's open up our Learn Edit window. And we'll begin learning IR. Now, it is important to note that currently I am connected to my to my router, that is. I am connected via Wi-Fi to my router that I've labeled KDS Training. I have a USB connection to my KD MC2500 that is mandatory for IR learning. And my MC2500 is connected via hard wire to the router, also mandatory for learning. So what I'm going to do is begin the Start Learning button here. Again, I could apply single burst if I'd like, but we'll avoid that so as not to eliminate the carrier. Now, when I learn, I'm going to hold my remote about 4 to 12 inches back from the IR learning window of the KD MC2500. So we go ahead, press the button, and once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times I press the button, because we're able here to see that our IR learner has recognized that this is NEC protocol IR the first, third, fourth, and fifth time. However, it looks like there was something slightly off, perhaps because our carrier came through a little early on the second reading, that it was not able to recognize that as an NEC protocol. So I could either now choose the average of the 5 learning, or I can assume, which seems pretty safe to say, that this is going to be NEC protocol. So let's go ahead and apply it to these, where now I have my result function that we've learned here. So I've now learned my IR power toggle command. So let's go ahead and close this learn window. And we can move on to our output 1 section, where there are 4 possible commands for the output 1. They are output 1 input 1 switching command, output 1 input 2 switching command, output 1 input 3 switching command, output 1 input 4 switching command. So let's go ahead and apply or an add function here. So these are all switching commands, and it looks like it has streamlined our action ID section to a certain amount of codes that would apply to an output command. Now, why do you need to make sure that you have all the proper categorization here of the 4x4 and having the proper output 1, output 2, output 3, output 4 tabs? Is because in your Navigator software, when you drag and drop a display or a device to an output zone, it knows that you are choosing, anytime you select a source, for example, it's going to be an output 1 command because you've dragged and dropped that display, for example, to be output 1 of your connectivity tree. you don't have to go through all the output commands, output 1, output 2, output 3, output 4. It will streamline it down for you. So let's give it a custom name here. Output 1, input 1. We could go ahead and open up our Learn window here. We could begin learning. Again, hold the remote approximately 4 to 12 inches back. And note that I'm not pressing and holding these buttons. In fact, I'm just very quick tapping of the button to ensure that I'm not giving any skewed IR information to our sensor here. Press once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Very interesting. Again, the second time it didn't read it, but our IR learning is a very nice function here where we are able to grab that, send that signal, that command 5 times and take the best of them. Or even here, let's say, let's get rid of this second one and let's start that learn again. Well, actually the button is already depressed, so we know we're still in learning mode. There we go. Now we've got all 5 recognized here. Stop learning. Make it NEC format. And I'm now able to close the window, go on to learn my output 1, input 2 command. Let's just copy this, shall we? Jump into my function name, where again, this is my own custom name for it. And I am now able to close my IR learning editing window so that I can go ahead and learn the output 1, input 2, output 1, input 3, and output 1, input 4 commands. So let's go ahead and add function. Select the appropriate action ID. Give it a name, output 1, input 2. We can now open our Learn window, start Learn. Looks like it grabbed that one without any problems whatsoever, all 5 times. So stop the Learn. Go ahead and apply NEC formatting to it. It could tell us the frequency even, 38,000. We could test if we needed. Let's see here. Okay. Let's add input 3. Go ahead and learn. Got to press start learn. Looks like my first 2 did not recognize. So we could go ahead and remove them to relearn, and my learning mode is still enabled. Giving me another issue. Perhaps it's user error of some sort. Very interesting. So we see here that my 3 of the 5 have not collected the carrier at all. Let's try just once more here. In fact, let's stop learning, clear all, start the learning again. There we go. Much better. It's probably user error. I was getting a little carried away with the button there, I think. Stop learning. NEC. We can apply. And finally, let's add a new function. Output 1, input 4. Go ahead and begin my learning mode enabled. Looks like it's picked everything up just fine there. Stop learning. Apply it as an NEC protocol. And OK. And now if I'd like to test in any of these, I can, for example, common all, select the command, and test the function. And actually I see on the face of my MC2500 the IR flasher connected to port 8, as it tells me here in my port for testing, number 8. My IR flasher blinks. It is connected to port 8. Also on the face of the MC2500, my LED for indicator for multifunction number 8 is blinking as well. And now what we can actually do is go in here, and you'll see instead of having to do some of the dirty work over and over again, we take a look at my output 1. I just go here into output 2, press the clone output 1 button. We'll do it here. We'll do it here as well. Now, of course, the code set's not correct, and so really this is, again, more useful for the RS-232 manager. But now what I'm able to do is just go in and edit these codes where it knows that it is output 2, input 1. So edit. Let's go ahead and clear all these. Start my learning. This is my output 2, input 1 command. Looks like it took them just fine. Stop the learn. Apply it as NEC. Now I have my new code set here. Put 1, input 2. Learn, edit. We'll begin the start learn. This is, excuse me, output 2, input 2. Stop learn. So I am now able to set the appropriate classifications of the device. For example, we have 1 output, 3 inputs. Okay, because it's not a matrix, it does not give us the option. See, by selecting switcher here, this implies multi-zone. So we deselect that, and really it's only concerned with the number of inputs at this point. So by selecting the item, I'm now able to begin adding functions here. And again, we're going to import a Pronto hex file, or code. And I actually have my Word document open here with the Pronto hex code for the power on command. So just take that, copy, bring in my Pronto hex button here, execute that, import Pronto hex learning window, and Control V to paste. And I now am able to hit OK, where I could take a look at this and you could see the waveform of the code we just learned. Looks good here, so I could go ahead and say OK, and let's now apply the appropriate action ID here, where this was a power on command, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just jump over here. Yep, that's right, power on. So let's give it the function name power on. Maybe even, there we go. Let's now add a new command. Okay. Do a Pronto hex once again. Jump over here. This is a power off command. Okay. Control V. Let's paste it in. Again, apply the appropriate action ID and give it the name that you desire. And we have a number of other commands in here, input 1, input 2, input 3 as well, to round out the code set. So let's copy. Let's add a new function. Go ahead, learn. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Here we are, pronto hex. Okay. This was my input 1 command. And let's see here. There we are, the appropriate action ID for that. Add another function. Pronto hex. This will be our input 2 command. Assign the appropriate action ID. Give it the desired name. Add our third and final input selection, which will be our input 3. Copy, paste, OK. Assign the appropriate action ID. Give it the desired name. And save our database. Now you're able to go ahead and do any kind of testing. Again, I'm tested through port number 8 here. Let's go ahead and just test. There we are. I see blinking on my IR flasher. I see it on my face of the unit on the respective LED as well. And of course, you should connect your devices to truly confirm the testing. And at this point, we can even close our IR manager so that we can open it back up and open up the custom database again, just so you can see where my own custom database has been stored. Let's see. Well, it's already open there. Let's go ahead and open again though. This was again in my documents, Key Digital. I have my own technical folder here, my IR library for Key Digital, and I have my 4x4 XC and my HDSW 3x1. And that concludes the look through the IR Manager. Stay tuned to C2 Part 3, where we'll begin working in the RS-232 Manager. Thanks very much for watching.